Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are using the Johnson edition and we turn now to poem 577, If I May Have It When It's Dead. By the way, in 28 poems of Emily's, this construction with the first word of being if is possible, starting her poems this way. So we're going to see this in a number of her poems. Now, the it is going to be interesting because the it is actually a who, and it's actually a him, and it's actually, in many ways, a lover. Now we're back to poems 322 and 474, where Emily hopes in some way to be reunited with her lover, who we don't know, in the afterlife. Almost always calling or referencing this lover as male, not female. But some scholars have pointed out maybe Emily's hiding something in regards to her love of Sue. Now, we want to point out that this poem has actually been published as two different poems, okay? The first three stanzas were published alone in 1896, and then the last four stanzas were published in 1945. This has something to do with the error done by Mrs. Todd, who is spoken of as one who's important compiler of Emily's stuff. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at LearnStrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily's our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our set of introductory comments as well as our preceding 576 poems. We just finished with 576. I prayed it first. Now, Wisher, the great biographer of Emily, calls this a curious poem. Some have seen this poem, however, as much worse. Ghoulish, repulsive, a little bit mad. In fact, some have even argued this is a poem about necrophilia. And I'm going to leave it to you to play with this, what really a lot of people have called a Gothic poem. If you read this poem literally, you're going to be challenged. By the way, the great scholar Judith Farr has pointed out that there is a fantasy in this poem that was not so alien to Victorian readers of the time. And Farr says it this way, quote, Dickinson's was an age in which the dead lived in mausoleums where, as in the case of Queen Victoria visiting Albert's entombed in Frogmore, for example, their survivors might come to sit a while or even brew a cup of tea. This was an age in which the young Emerson, as in Ralph Waldo Emerson, who could stand his loneliness no longer, dug up his wife Ellen's body by lantern light so that he might hold it in his arms again. By the way, we've given full lectures on the Emerson lectures essays at LearnStrong.net, and we commented on the passion and the power of Emerson in that regards towards his lost wife. We'll ask how you read this. Do you read this literally or somehow symbolically? If I may have it when it's dead, I'll be contented. So if just as soon as breath is out, it shall belong to me. Until they lock it in the grave, 'tis bliss I cannot weigh, for though they lock thee in the grave, myself can own the key. Think of it, lover. I and thee permitted face to face to be, after a life, a death, will say. For death was that, and this is thee. I'll tell thee all, how bald it grew, how midnight felt at first to me, how all the clocks stopped in the world and sunshine pinched me. 'Twas so cold. Then, how the grief got sleepy, some, as if my soul were deaf and dumb, just making signs across to thee, that this way thou couldst notice me. I'll tell you how I tried to keep a smile, to show you when this deep all waited, we look back for play at those old times in Calvary. Forgive me if the grave comes slow, for coveting to look at thee. Forgive me if to stroke thy frost out visions paradise. Exclamation point. Now, some students have read this poem and said, this is the most whacked out poem I've ever read in my life. Others say, I think I understand that Emily's trying to come to terms with the grieving and the losing of one she cares for, her lover. There is an interesting communication happening in this poem, which will explain one more time, guys, why we called our series Chats with Emily. Notice, if I may have it when it's dead. Now, technically, of course, a dead body isn't it, right? I mean, technically, although we normally don't think of it that way. And notice how the poem moves from an it to a thee. I'll be contented. Notice we go from contented to bliss. Dash, so, dash. If just as soon as breath, notice capitalized, is out, it shall belong to me. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Notice this construction of to me that takes us back to 576, right? How prayer would feel to me, right? And you saw it in 575 as well. Heaven has different signs to me. We're going to get to some of those signs again here, right? In other words, I'll be fine as long as they let me have the body, the dead body, until they lock it in the grave. Now, obviously, who is the they of this poem? We've seen this before. In 576, I prayed it first a little girl because they told me to. Notice, until they lock it in the grave. Notice capitalized. 'Tis bliss I cannot weigh. Now, by the way, again, Wisher, the great scholar, has pointed out that Emerson often spoke of God as an it instead of the more personal pronoun. So maybe Emily's playing that game with death. She says, until they lock it in the grave, 'tis bliss I cannot weigh if I can just have the body, for though they lock thee in the grave, myself can own the key. I can't help but read these lines and think about when Laertes jumps down into Ophelia's grave in Hamlet 5. You'll remember this. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. You'll remember this, that Laertes is so overcome with grief that his sister has died, drowning, that he jumps down in the grave and asks for the dirt to be piled on top of him. Is Emily challenging that? Who knows? But notice, myself can own the key. And then she says, think of it, lover! Exclamation point. The exclamation points in this poem matter. Think of it, lover. Again, she doesn't identify who this lover is, capitalized. But this kind of speaking, almost, it's very like a kind of very personal type of way. Think of it, think of it. And again, chats with Emily comes to mind here. Think of it, lover. And then I and thee, much has been made of the grammar here. I and thee permitted face to face to be. By the way, permitted by who? Or whom, right? I mean, who's allowing this? Okay. They, whoever that is. After a life, dash, a death, dash, will say, again, this chats with Emily, guys, there's a reason we call our series this. For death was that, and this is thee. Now notice, we move from the it to the thee, and she seems to be inexplicably saying, you're more a thee once you're dead than you were a thee before you were dead. Because why? Is it got anything to do with the proximity and the closeness to Emily? And then she says it. I'll tell thee all. Once we're together and you're dead and we're together. I'll tell thee all. Again, chats with Emily comes to mind. I'll tell thee all, dash, how bald it grew. How midnight felt at first to me. How all the clocks stopped in the world and sunshine pinched me. 'Twas so cold. Again, the hyperbole of this language is amazing. This also takes us back to poem 510. You'll maybe recall when we played that game of 510. And this is how she said it, just to return to that set of lines. It was not death, for I stood up and all the dead lie down. It was not night, for all the bells put out their tongues for noon. It was not frost. Again, we're going to come to the stroking of the frost here in a bit. It was not frost, for on my flesh I felt Sicarius crawl, nor fire, for just my marble feet could keep a chancel cool. And yet it tasted like them all. The figures I've seen, set orderly for burial, reminded me of mine, as if my life were shaven and fitted to a frame and could not breathe without a key. We're back to the key. And 'twas like midnight some, when everything that ticked had stopped, and space stares all around, or grisly frost's first autumn norns repel the beating ground, but most like chaos, stopless, cool, without a chance or spar, or even a report of land to justify despair. Here notice she says, I tell you all about how it was, how I felt when I lost you. Then, she says, I'd keep going, how the grief got sleepy. You'll remember when we did 341, the nerves sit ceremonious like tombs. Then the grief got sleepy, dash, some, dash, as if my soul were deaf and dumb. Again, this use of the word if that we'll come to with if the grave. As if my soul were deaf and dumb. We're going to get to the soul study in our 578 poem that follows this one. Just making signs. Again, we're back to 575 with signs. Across to thee, that this way thou couldst notice me. Now, I think this is a I think this is a, where they say Freudian slip, I think this is an important moment in the poem. I think Emily's always longing to be noticed by the ones she cares the most about. We've seen this over and over again. At this point she says, I can make you notice me by talking with you. And then we're back to chats with Emily. I'll tell you, how, notice we go from past to present tense. I'll tell you how I tried to keep a smile to show you when this deep all waited. We look back for play. You guys remember 467? We do not play on graves because there isn't room. Besides, it isn't even, it slants, and people come and put a flower on it and hang their faces, so we're fearing that their hearts will drop and crush our pretty play, and so we move as far as enemies away, just looking round to see how far. It is occasionally this idea of playing, but notice how her attempt to rhyme play with Calvary, it's brilliant, it's beyond brilliant, right? At those old times in Calvary, well, of course it's on Calvary, right? She uses Calvary 11 times. You'll remember in 348, it's the Queen of Calvary, she calls herself. And then, as if she's crossed a line, as if she is suggesting, I'll be even closer with you when I have your body after it's dead. She says twice, forgive me. If the grave, notice capitalized, come slow, for coveting to look at thee. Forgive me, if to stroke thy frost out vision's paradise. Now, this use of the word stroke will take us back to 187. We'll see it again in 758 and 1598. Is it a sexual reference here? Some have said possibly. Out vision's paradise takes us back to 575 in her discussion of paradise there. She'll mention paradise in 55 of her poems. Okay, guys, where can we even go with this? Well, when we get to poem 622, okay, we'll come back to this. To know just how he suffered would be dear. To know if any human eyes were near to whom he could entrust his wavering gaze until it settled broad on paradise. To know if he was patient, part content, was dying as he thought, or different. Was it a pleasanter day to die? Did the sunshine face his way? What was his furthest mind of home or God, or what the distance say, at news that he ceased human nature such a day? And wishes, had he any, just his sigh accented, had been legible to me. And was he confident until ill fluttered out in everlasting well? And if he spoke, what name was best? What last? What one broke off with at the dourest? Was he afraid or tranquil? Might he know how consciousness could grow, till love that was, and love too best to be, meet with the junction be, eternity. And when we get to 625, 'twas a long parting, but the time for interview had come before this judgment seat of God, the last and second time these fleshless lovers met, a heaven in a gaze, a heaven of heavens, the privilege of one another's eyes, no lifetime on them, apparelled as the new, unborn except they had beheld, born infiniter now. Was bridal air like this, a paradise, the host, and cherubim, and seraphim, the unobtrusive guest? When we get to 734, 734, we'll play this game. We'll come back to all these guys because these are amazing poems. If he were living, dare I ask, and how if he be dead? And so around the words I went of meeting them, afraid I hinted changes, lapse of time, the surfaces of years I touched with caution lest they crack and show me to my fears, reverted to adjoining lives, joining, right? Adroitly turning out, wherever I suspected graves was prudenter, I thought, and he, I pushed, with sudden force in face of the suspense, was buried. He, my life just holds the trench. What are we going to do with this poem? I think the argument she's making is it's hard to not be with the one we love, with our pal, especially in the issues of death. At 2b, well, obviously, the extreme language of this poem requires a close reading, no doubt. At 3a, I can't help but think about the Orpheus story and Eurydice, and the fact that Orpheus is willing to go to Hades in that famous myth. We've given lectures on it at learnstrong.net. Finally, at 3b, who is a lover in your life that you feel this strongly about, if you have one. And do you think Emily's the most remarkable poet you've ever read? I hope so. Thank you.